Still not showing?
I do not see anything yet. No.
Okay, because it says on air showing screen, so I'm not sure.
Let's see here. It may be your internet connection speed. What I'm going to do is take the screen back and then re-give it to you and see what happens.
Okay, the connection should be fine. It's on a 100 megabit line.
Well, yeah, that should be more than enough. All right. You're now presenter. There.
Um,
Now we see your screen.
is it? Okay, great.
All right. So.
Okay, so
Oh,
tonight, well, for me it's
go
quite
ahead.
late now. So it's about 1 o'clock in the morning for me now. So my apologies if I ramble at all. But tonight we're just going to look over the basics of the in-app purchase system. I'm not going to spend any time really looking at the differences from the old system. I'm just going to be looking at the new one. But I'm going to be putting a particular focus on how to make the buttons dynamic and the considerations you have to have regarding how you present your in-app purchase to the user and what Apple and, to a lesser extent, Google and Amazon will expect from you. So I've just put a couple of quick links that people will probably want to check out. Of course, there's the information in the GameSalad cookbook. GameSalad Guru did a really good video that looks at the basics of how this new system works, which is worth everyone watching as well. I'm going to be looking at some of the same stuff in this, but I'm going to be moving past that reasonably quickly. Focus of this is going to be the tutorial template that I released, which has extensive notes that people can look at, that I'm going to be talking you through partly today as well. There's also a shop template by Ginga Gaming, but I didn't know about putting a link for that because I think it's a paid thing, but it's an option for people if they want it. So the advantages of the new system are much greater than I think a lot of people realize, because the end result for a lot of people will be just pretty much the same. They'll have a button, you click, you buy your purchase. But it gives you the opportunity to have much, much more feedback than we had previously, and the ability to provide that to the users. You get to know what's happening to a much greater extent, so you can tell the users to a much greater extent, which satisfies Apple because they can be very arbitrary in what they do and don't allow. And it just gives you much more flexibility overall. However, it is more difficult to use. It does take a bit more effort, particularly if you want to really be giving the user that feedback. And as we'll see later, there is still one bit of feedback that we don't really still get. But there is a way that another forum member pointed out that we can still work around that. So the basis of the new system is the purchase table. And don't worry, there's going to be some slides, but we're going to be looking at actual logic soon. It's added to every project. This did cause a little bit of confusion for some people trying to delete the table or adding a new one thinking they needed to be adding it. But it's there automatically, so we need to do almost nothing to get that first thing set up. And the table is used to communicate between, well, to present to the game coder the communication between Google, Apple, and the game itself. But it's not suitable for tracking the purchases in future sessions, as we'll look at in a little bit. You still do need to be making your own table or game attributes to track what has and hasn't been bought between different launches of the game. So most people are probably quite familiar with what the table looks like by now. I'm sure they'll have poked around and had a look, even if they're not sure what it does. But there's essentially 3 sections to it, one of which we edit and one of which we look at a lot. So this first section is the only bit that you as the maker of the game are going to be really having any direct effect on. You've got the ID box, the column, and the consumable, non-consumable Boolean column. So you're going to put the ID in that you've taken from your setup on the iTunes Connect or the Google equivalent, and you're going to put it in that box. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And you've got the toggle to say, is this a consumable or non-consumable purchase? A non-consumable purchase, which is the default, is essentially a purchase that when the user buys, they keep forever. The you can't buy it again. You can only buy it one time. And a consumable is one, for example, extra lives or power or whatever resource there might be. You might be, or coins, you might be buying it over and over and over and over again. So the one purchase item will be usable multiple times. You're not really going to need to worry about the name and the price box at any point. The name will be pulled from the server and the price pulled from the server, and you don't edit that. But you can read that information and use it in your in-app purchase shop if you want to. And the state column, which is the most important one for getting the most out of the in-app purchase, is the last one, and we're going to be looking at that in quite a lot of detail. It's going to come up an awful lot over the course of tonight. And there are three possible states for it. Unpurchased, which just means that the user has not yet bought this particular item. Pending, which means the user is currently in the process of buying the item. The request has been made but hasn't yet been fulfilled or rejected. And purchase, which means that that purchase has been completed and recognized by Apple or Google or whoever. The ID, the one thing you really need to bear in mind with the ID is that if you have any intention at all of making your game cross-platform, so not just Apple but Amazon and things as well, or want to publish on Apple, you want to make it all lowercase, because you can't use capital letters in the Google store. I'm pretty sure it was the Google store you can't use capital letters in. So you want to use lowercase because otherwise you've got to go back and you've got to change them all, or you've got to have two versions of the game, and it just makes for a headache. So just use lowercase in the start. And the ID will just be taken directly from the ID specified in iTunes Connect. I'm not really going to be looking at iTunes Connect tonight and how that fits in. That's a slightly different topic. The request purchase data is the first thing you're really going to need to be using. I'm just going to look briefly at each of the behaviors. I'm going to be showing how they're used in several contexts in a little bit, so I'm not going to spend very long on them. I'm going to be whizzing through this bit quite quickly. You put in the start index, which will presumably be 1, but you might be wanting to only use some of the purchases you've put in the table for a particular game, but the end index can be either the last row on the table you want to be looked at, or -1, which will automatically make it the very last row on the table, not just the last one you want to be considered. And the callback attribute, which again I'm going to talk about a bit more, so I'm going to, I wasn't pressing my button, so I'm going to skip over that to a large extent now. What we need to know is that it should be a game attribute, really. You can make it a self attribute, but for reasons we'll see later, you're going to need to be referring to it for more than one actor, almost certainly. If you're publishing to the iTunes store, Apple will reject you if you don't have a restore button. Even though there are big name games without restore buttons, Apple will almost certainly reject you if you don't have one. So you're going to need to make it a game attribute. And it should be an integer. There are 3 states. Not yet attempted will be 0. So if the attribute is currently 0, it just means no attempt has really been made. Communication has been successful will give you a 1, and communication has failed a -1. So you always know, have you got connection to the store to be able to make these purchases? There's no guessing like with the old system. You know if you can or can't make that connection, and therefore you know should you let the user try and make a purchase or not. There's the buy item. Only a couple of things to think about here. First of all, if you type it directly into the box without opening the expression editor, that's fine, just don't put quotation marks. If you do open the expression editor, make sure you put quotation marks. That seems to get a lot of people. I see on the forums quite a lot, people have opened the expression editor, typed the item name in, closed the expression editor, and that won't get you very far. So just make sure you're typing it directly into that box. You can use attributes, though, to refer to what product ID it is. So if you've got 10 buttons in your shop, you could have each of them have a self attribute, say in the ID, and then use the same prototype actor to power every button. So that's very handy, and it's always worth considering. You can refer to the purchase table if you want to, although things can get a bit confusing quite quickly if you do that, but it is a possibility and can save you some steps. And you can find a specific row. So if you've got 10 actors, you might number them 1 to 10. You can use the self ID there to say which row in the table you want to look at to find the product ID that this button will represent. So lots of flexibility and power there. You only want to be triggering it when the callback attribute is 1. If you're trying to use it when it's 0 or -1, then there's no communication to the shop, so you can't be getting very far with that. And it must be in response to a user action. Apple will reject you, and the other stores probably won't notice because they don't check very hard, but will eventually reject you if you're automatically triggering a purchase, even if it's a free one. So you must only be triggering the buy item behavior when the user has pressed a button. Consume item, this one also causes some confusion. When you've made a purchase of a consumable item and the item has been successfully given to the player, so a table change has been made or a behavior attribute has been changed, you then will trigger this behavior. And all it will do is say this item is no longer in the process of being purchased and is now available again to be purchased. It won't consume what you've given to the user. It will only free up that item to be purchased again. That's pretty much what I just said. I'll skip past that. Now, the reason you really need to pay a lot more attention with this new in-app purchase system and why it's so valuable to us, and it was a very good job that it was implemented when it was, is Apple are getting more and more erratic in how they're enforcing their rules. And more often, people are finding they're being rejected for things that their last game wasn't rejected for, or their friend's game wasn't rejected for. And different reviewers will reject your apps for different reasons. And in my experience, some reviewers will let you put in very simple in-app purchase where the user presses a button, they get given their item, and some will reject it. They will reject it because the reason they'll give is there wasn't feedback to the user. Nothing happened, in other words. It can take 5, 10, 15, even more seconds for the purchase to bounce back from Apple and the pop-up to come saying, you have now need to put in your password and purchase this for 69p or whatever, 79p now. So if you're not giving that feedback, there is a decent chance that Apple will reject you. Now, you can just submit the game again and hope for an easy reviewer, or you can take the time to put in a slightly more thorough system. Apple don't care if the delay is their fault. If you're waiting 20 seconds for them to respond because their servers are hammered, they don't care. If, as we saw with the problem that happened a few months ago, if the problem is entirely within Apple's testing environment, they will reject you. They just don't care. Amazon and Google, especially Google, don't really test this stuff with any thoroughness. So it's going to be less of an issue there. This is really a matter of Apple doing what they want with no real consistency. So I'll just skip past that. To avoid this wrath of Apple, then you need to have these more flexible user interface, clear user feedback, and cover all your bases. Or you can just resubmit until you get a lazy reviewer. So to ensure that you don't get rejected and that you've been as thorough and given as much feedback to your users as possible, you're going to need a whole bunch of different possible buttons. Now, if you've got just 1 or 2 buttons in your store, you're probably going to want to display this information on the button itself, which is the example I'm going to give here. But if you want to have lots and lots of items in your store, you're probably going to want to have a pop-up that comes up and provides this information, so you're showing it once for all the buttons. But we're just going to be looking at one button tonight, so we're keeping it a bit simpler. So you're going to need to say, you can buy the item now, and some kind of indication that the item has been bought. I've just grayed out the button because I was being lazy. You're also going to need to be able to tell the user that their purchase failed for one reason or another, and there are quite a few reasons why it might fail. You will need to be saying, okay, you've pressed the button, we're now trying to contact Apple or Amazon to to process your order. So you've got to wait. You've got to have the restore button and the same things for the restore button. So you've got quite a lot of buttons and interface that you're really going to have to take into account. I've already said that, skip past that. So we're going to take a quick look now at just a very simple in-app purchase situation and the way it works at the most basic level. So this is ignoring everything I've just said about giving the user feedback and just looking at how you need to string together the different behaviors the most basic way. So first of all, you'd be requesting the purchase data. Now, my preference is to not do this until the user has pressed a button. Because if you do this, there's a good chance that the user will be prompted to enter a password, and that will freak a lot of users out. If you do it when they're first entering the shop, that minimizes the impact a little bit, but you're still going to get a lot of users saying, I'm not wanting to buy anything yet, why are you trying to make me buy something, and cancelling out of your shop entirely. So my recommendation is that you don't just trigger this automatically like is being done here, that you put it in the button like we're going to see in the more complicated example. When they press the button and the table has been, the purchase data table has been successfully filled and the callback has therefore been set to 1, you then purchase the item, and when the item is registered as purchased, because the table cell, that fifth column in the table, has changed from unpurchased to pending and then to purchased, when it's registered as purchased, then you change the game attribute. So it can be as simple as that for the in-app purchase. So if you want to just get this in your game nice and quickly and just get it done, you can do it very quickly, but there's a lot of advantages to taking your time to do it properly. With the consumable items, it's basically the same thing, except you need to make sure you're saving the attribute, and which we should have done in the other one as well, to be honest, but I forgot that, and that you're using the consume item once you're sure you've awarded the player the thing that they've bought, in this case 10 lives I'm giving them, then you consume the item and they can then click that button again if they want to. So you've got some easy ways of doing these things in the in-app purchase. For the restore, you can just simply ask them to restore. I should have put a callback equals 1 there as well, just to be sure. So if you want to do it simply, you can. It doesn't need to be more complicated. In fact, it can be far simpler than the last system if you want it to be. You don't need to worry about extra scenes and things. But in reality, you're going to want to do something a little bit more complicated and a little bit more thorough. So I'm just going to quickly show you what we're going to be looking at, and this is going to be the main focus of what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'll slow down a little bit for this part. So what you would want to happen is when you load up the game and you click the button to buy something, you're going to be immediately given feedback to show that you've pressed this button. So you're not going, nothing's happening, and press and press and press, nothing's happening. You're immediately being told that you've pressed this button. Now, hopefully, the communication with Apple will be successful, and I've just put some little buttons to emulate what would happen in the real world, because unfortunately we can't get this feedback from gamesalad. You've got to actually publish an ad hoc build and test it on device to really see this work. We can approximate it by pretending and making these changes manually in the testing of this. So we've seen that the table's now been successfully filled. It's got a 1 in it. So if we then say it's purchased, it's been purchased. If we, I'm going to have to restart it because remember that. If we want to say that it's failed, we can either say there's no connection, in which case it will say, look, we can't connect to Apple, or we can say that it's been a successful purchase, in which, I meant to do unsuccessful purchase, but we'll see that in a minute anyway. So we want that flexibility and that ability to give the user that constant feedback that people need to be confident that your app is working as it should do. So I'm just going to, well, I've got the one with all the notes in here, so I'm going to have to, you're going to have to look at some notes probably. First thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we've got an attribute that's going to store the success or failure of the purchase, the current state of the purchase. This has to be a game level one, because you're going to need to access it from both the buy button and the restore button. And it could be a table if you want. If you've got lots of purchases, you're probably going to want it to be a table, but in this circumstance, we've just got the one, so it's much simpler to make it a game attribute. So we need to load that, because if we don't know the state of that, then we don't know if we should even offer the user the ability to buy anything. If they've already bought it, we need to know. Now, it may be that you think, oh, well, surely I can look at the purchase table and see, does it say purchased next to this item in the purchase table? But we can't do that for several reasons, partly because we won't necessarily have filled the purchase table. Again, we're putting it now in the button, so it's only filled when the user presses the button. But also, that won't necessarily be saved between states, and if you do save it, it's very easy for it to get self-confused. So stick to your own table and your own attributes, rather than trying to cut that step out and rely on the purchase table itself. So when the user presses the Buy Now button, we've got quite a lot of things that we need to be keeping in mind and considering. First of all, they have to press the button, but we also have to check, has the item been purchased? If it has, then we don't let them press the Buy Now button because they already own the item. Now, we've got these two other attributes here, the buying and restoring, which we need to use so that one button knows what the other button is doing. So that when you are clicking to buy, the restore button knows that even though the table's been filled, that you're not trying to restore, so it shouldn't fire off any logic to do with restoring. And it also knows to change its image to keep up with the state of your purchase. So when we click Buy Now, it doesn't just say please wait on the Buy Now button, it also says it on the Restore button. So we need to be telling the Restore button that this is happening. We also need to be sure that there isn't currently a restore in progress, so that they can't click Restore and then click Buy and have both things happening at once. We want to limit them to just one. So the first thing we do is we change the image to the to the Please Wait image. So if I'm clicking it, it immediately gets changed to the Please Wait image, so that the user is immediately told that they have pressed this button. We need to say, yes, we are buying something. We're not restoring something, we're buying something. We then can finally fire this request purchase data. As I said, you don't really want to do it before that and freak out the user, so we will do it at this point. Now, we need to bear in mind that we only want to do this if it hasn't already been done. So if the current state is 0 and nothing's been attempted yet, or -1 and it's failed so far, we want to fire this behavior. If it's already a 1 and this table data has been filled, we don't want to do it again, so we've got the condition to stop that there. Now, once the table has been successfully filled, that's when we actually start to do the buying of the item. So we could combine this callback and buying into one rule. I've left them separate just to make it a bit clearer the steps that are happening. So when you've got the table successfully filled and a buying has been registered in that previous rule, then we attempt to purchase the item. Now this one here is purely there in order to enable the pretend behavior of the purchase pending unpurchased. So if I click the Buy Now and say yes, the table's been filled, it will put this testing template in the state of saying yes, it's currently pending, so we can continue to reasonably accurately approximate the behavior the user will see without having to build an ad hoc version. So you won't want to put this in your game, it's just there for testing purposes. Now, if at this point there is no success in the buying, if the fifth column of the purchase table for that item, the purchased, unpurchased, pending column, if that turns to unpurchased, then the bias fails. It should be pending. If it turns to unpurchased, that that's fails. Now you might want to put this in a timer. Gamesalad doesn't guarantee the order of execution, so it is possible that this will be checked before the buy item has been triggered. You might want to put it in a timer. I didn't find it was necessary to do so, but you probably should if you want to be absolutely sure. Just a 0.05 second timer or something. If we've said to the purchase table, yes, it's filled, and we've attempted to buy the item, and so it's swapped to pending, and it then finds that the purchase table reads unpurchased, it means that either because the user cancelled or because there was a problem on Apple's end, they rejected your purchase attempt, it will be then set to unpurchased, and we can then tell the user that the purchase attempt has failed and set the buying attribute back to false because we're no longer attempting to buy. So if we attempt to buy and the table's filled and then we go back to unpurchased, it will say, look, your attempt to buy has failed. And it's important that the user knows when it's failed so that they're not worrying about if something's going to happen or is happening. So my guinea pigs are being very noisy. I don't know if you can hear them in the background. So you need to be providing that first bit of feedback to the user if it happens to fail right off the bat. Now, if the table itself can't be filled, then we need to tell the user, look, we can't make the connection to Apple. We can't do that. And we need to be cancelling the buy attempt because there's no point trying to continue because we can't communicate with Apple. Now, you may want to be putting a timer in to just say, look, we failed, keep trying. They've requested a purchase, let's keep trying and see if we can make it happen. So if we attempt to purchase, but the user doesn't manage to make a connection to Apple, it will say can't connect. After 10 seconds, it will make that attempt again, and if it then succeeds, we then can offer the button again. So you need to be keeping in mind that there are lots of possibilities for this to fail because either the user's pressing cancel or it just can't make that connection. Now, once we've said to the game, fill the purchase table and attempt to make a purchase, we've already looked at what happens if that purchase immediately fails, but what if it succeeds? If it succeeds, this fifth column of the relevant row on the purchase table will change to purchased. At that point, we know that Apple have said, or Google or whoever have said, yes, this purchase has been successfully completed. Now, if this has been completed successfully, we need to change our game attribute to say, yes, the item has been purchased. To make sure we save it so that when the user loads the game next time, the game will remember that the item has been purchased, and to make sure that we're not going to be losing track of that. And also setting buying to false because we're done buying something. So if we successfully make a purchase, so we've clicked the purchase button, the table's been successfully filled, the buy request has been sent, and the purchase has been completed successfully, we then disable the button, and they won't be able to press it now because we made one of the conditions of pressing it be that this attribute hasn't been changed. And we changed the image to show, well, they've already made that purchase. We do the image change somewhere slightly different, though, because there's more circumstances to consider there, which is just here. So if the item purchased is true, if they've successfully purchased it, that attribute's been changed, we then can disable the button. We want to put this separate because we also want the game to recognize this even if no attempt to fill the purchase table has been made, so that if they load the game, they've got no internet, and they don't try and buy anything, we still know that this purchase has been completed. The attribute was loaded right at the beginning, and so we want to keep this separate. We can't rely on the purchase table saying purchased, so we can't just put this in here because there's lots of circumstances where this just won't be filled, where it will be blank still, or where it will be blank still. So we want to make that change completely separately. Um, Now, we've also got a restore button. You've got to have a restore button one way or the other. So we also need to be keeping track of when the restore button is doing stuff. And so if the game is restoring, we need to say wait, just as we did when the game was buying. So if I click the restore button, both buttons change to please wait because we're tracking what the restore button's doing in the buy button as well. Now, there's lots of circumstances where a purchase won't be completed, and so we need to make the button usable again afterwards. So we need to say, well, if they're buying, then we don't want them to be able to use the button, so we'll be displaying the please wait. If they're restoring, it will be the same, we'll be displaying the please wait. We need to make sure that they've actually filled the table. We need to make sure that they haven't purchased the item already. If they've already purchased the item, then we're going to have grayed the button out. And if the purchase hasn't failed, if we've not registered a fail, we want to, if we've registered a fail, we don't want to be letting them see the buy image straight away. We'll look at how to do that just below. But we need to make sure that we've got all these conditions met before the image is displayed again. If you want to, you can say if they fail, after a period of time, show the buy now button again. You may want to just say, look, it's failed until you press again, you don't know if it's going to succeed. Or you may want to just live in a world of optimism and say, in 3 seconds time, it might well succeed, so here you go, we'll show you the button again. So if I just show you a failure of a purchase, it will say buy failed, but after 3 seconds, it will say, okay, try again now if you want to. Now, we're not actually preventing them from trying to make another purchase when buy failed is displayed. We're just showing that. So there's a lot there, and it looks quite complicated, but in reality, it's not that convoluted or difficult. You've just got to keep in mind that there are quite a few circumstances where a button may need to display one thing or another before one action or another. You've got right at the start, before anything's happened, you've got when a table hasn't successfully filled, you've got when the table has been filled, you've got when a purchase has been attempted, when the purchase has failed, when the purchase has succeeded. So you've just got to bear in mind these possible situations, and when you break it down, there aren't that many considerations. It just seems a little overwhelming at first. Now, you also need to be bearing in mind the restore. There's also, you've got to have this restore button, as I keep saying, and I keep saying it because people so often don't bother to put one in thinking, oh, it just won't matter, and then they get rejected. I've had at least 5 or 6 people in the last 6 months or so since this all came out getting rejected because they didn't bother to put a restore button in and saying to me, why is this not working, and why are they rejecting me? I shouldn't need to have a restore, or I do the restore automatically, and both can be as disastrous. And it's just the same in the restore button. I'm not going to go through it in great detail because it all works in essentially the same way as the buy button. If you wanted to, you could combine probably a reasonable amount of this logic into one button, but I've left it separate to try and make it clearer. And again, if you download this template, every step of this that I'm looking at with you is explained in some detail, and it is free to download. There's no restrictions on it or anything. There is one thing we really need to keep in mind, or another note that I missed there, in the restore button though, and this is an issue that I encountered while I was setting up my first game with this in-app purchase system, and I was really scratching my head at and really did not know how to deal with. And this is the bit of feedback that we don't get. It's the only bit of feedback we don't get in this new system. And Colander on the forums, and I give him some credit in the template. I don't remember if I linked to his thread, but it's worth finding the thread where he talks about this because he has some very interesting observations to make about it all. Recommends this method of keeping track of this. He was using it for a slightly different purpose, but it works really well here. When you make the restore attempt, it doesn't change to pending in the purchase table. So you don't know if it then goes successful or unsuccessful. Now, when you make a restore attempt, it may be that the player has bought the item that you're wanting to restore. And so it will then hopefully change to purchased. And that's good. You've got that feedback, no problem there. It may be, though, that they haven't purchased this. And so if we do a restore without any way of tracking it, it will come up as unpurchased if they haven't purchased it. But we'll also have the problem of not knowing if there's been any success at all in running it. If you've previously made a purchase on another one, the table will have been filled. It will be saying unpurchased in the column, regardless of if you've actually restored or not. And so we need to blank the table out so that it says nothing. And that way we know at the very least if it's been purchased or unpurchased. And if we don't get any feedback, we can tell from not getting the feedback that there's been a problem communicating, and the purchase has been cancelled, or the purchase has not been able, or so restore has been cancelled, or the restore has not been able to be attempted. Once we've done that, then we attempt the restore. And a restore will restore all non-consumable purchases. So if you attempt to restore, it will fill in the table for every item, be them purchased or unpurchased. So we get that immediate feedback to know if something is purchased. And because we've blanked out the table, we also can tell immediately if something is unpurchased. So I put the timer in for this one. I didn't in the other button. I probably should have done, but I have put it in for this one. So if after a very short period of time, the table has been refilled by something, and it says unpurchased, which means we've got a response from Apple. It may take longer than 0.1 seconds. It should take longer than 0.1 seconds. So as soon as it says unpurchased, we know that the player has not previously purchased that item. Now, I was lazy in not making another button here, but rather than saying failed, you'd probably want to say hasn't purchased by now or something like that. But we also need to take into account the possibility of, well, what if the user has attempted to make a purchase and they have either clicked cancel, restore, and click cancel, or they've attempted to make the restore and it's just failed to do so. And so if I've said 30 seconds here, 30 seconds is quite a long time, you'll probably want it to be less, but then I found 20 seconds isn't that unusual for an purchase attempt time anyway, or restore attempt time anyway. If it's still blank after that period of time, then we know we've not had any feedback from Apple, we don't have the necessary information, so we know it's failed by default. Then most of the rest is pretty much the same kind of thing as in the buy button. So instead of when restoring the item, we've got the check to see what the buy button's doing. When it's successful, all of this could be dumped into the purchase button, the buy button for sure, but I've left it here just to make sure that what each button is doing is a bit clearer, but you could definitely condense the logic down there a bit and put this in the purchased in the other button. So it's all the same kind of thing. So I'll just spend a moment looking at how I've done the simulation, but I've talked through that faster than I intended to. I should have taken that a little bit slower probably, but it's just you can give all the feedback you need to with a reasonably minimal amount of logic, and have each button paying attention to what the other buttons are doing, and keep Apple happy and keep your users happy and informed, preferably with less ugly buttons than these though. So all I've done for these is...
There's a question, Dan Kilgore, something about should you give the time, this was a while back, should you give the table time to change? Give the table time to change, should the run to completion box be checked?
At which point, you shouldn't need to worry about that at any point really, because all of the actions that are taking place are only really going to be mattering if a change happens. So if no change has taken place, you don't need to be worrying. So it doesn't matter if it takes a quarter of a second or 10 seconds for the table to change, because you're not putting a time limit on anything happening except for when you've specified a failure to happen after this amount of time, in which case the amount of time you give is entirely up to you. So the only point that it would matter is back in that restore button when I said 30 seconds down here. On that one I have ticked run to completion, but that's the only place where you need to give the table any time to change. And in this case, time to not change. Now, was that answering your question, or was your question something slightly different?
I think Bill was, actually he was saying it was a statement, not a question. He just accidentally typed the question mark. Okay. So
okay.
Yes, run to completion should be checked on one of those. Okay.
But only on that one. It doesn't matter anywhere else, because everywhere else you're only making a change when the change is detected. Only performing any action when the change is detected. So you don't need to worry about giving it time, because by default it will be waiting anyway. Okay, were there any other questions before I move on? I'm not going to be talking for too much longer.
All right, I'm just going to let everyone know I'll go over most of the questions at the end. That one seemed time sensitive, and I missed one earlier on, which we'll probably have to do some backtracking for. But otherwise, I'll just let everyone know we'll save all the questions for the end so you can keep talking.
Okay, I'll just very briefly look at these, then I've just got a few more considerations to talk through in more general terms. Now, all I've done for these buttons, and I'm not going to go into the logic because they literally are just buttons, is each of these is this callback state button. You click it, it will set the table to the callback attribute to the state of 0, 1, or -1. So that just lets you, if you don't have anything like that and you run the callback at the request purchase data attribute behavior, then you won't know what happens. Nothing from that point onwards will be testable in your game until you put it on an ad hoc, because you'll never get a response. As you'll see, gamesalad, when you request the table, will say in-app is not supported in the viewer, and that's that. So all these do is, if I click this one, it will say that attribute is now 1. And the next actions, which that pop-up was just saying a purchase attempt had been made, which isn't supported in the viewer. So all those buttons do is that, and the same for these ones. All they do is change the state. The pending we did in the buy now button, and the the buy now button, we did that manually, and I said don't put that in your game because you won't want it to be done manually in your actual game, which is why when I click the buy now and it says, okay, the buy request for the item has been sent, but that's not supported in the viewer, it changes to pending automatically, but the other two are, again, just buttons that you click. And all that really does is it just gives you an easy way of doing the majority of your testing of this without having to pump out endless ad hocs. One thing to bear in mind when doing these ad hoc builds is that Apple have been really mean about testing this stuff. And if you make an ad hoc and then drop it onto your device using Xcode, it won't work. I don't know if people have got it to work. I've failed to get it to work in every attempt I've made, and people I've spoken to have failed to get it to work that way. Apple won't recognize your sandbox environment in that kind of ad hoc build. I found you have to run it through Apple's test flight system to get a successful response. Now, I'm not sure if other people have had any success with that. If you have had success just doing it through Xcode, then please do say, because we're very interested to hear exactly what you did, see if we can duplicate it, would make life easier. But you have to be running it through Apple's test flight, which is a palaver. It takes ages. You'll be looking at least a 10 to 20 minute turnaround on each attempted build if you're having to do it that way. So it's worth taking the time to just put these little actors in your game just to give you that option of testing without having to go through that rigmarole. Now, I don't think I put more in the PowerPoint, but I will take a moment just to talk through a couple of situations that you might find yourself in that aren't immediately obvious on how to deal with. I had a friend who I was looking at putting this in-app purchase in his game, and he was quite lucky. We didn't do all the different button states. We just did the buy, and Apple accepted him on that. Literally the same day, I had another game rejected because it didn't have the buttons giving feedback. So they're that capricious in their review process. Now, imagine a situation where you have an in-app purchase item that you want to sell to the user that isn't as simple as, oh, well, they just buy this and then they get the reward, but it isn't a consumable item. It's something like at the start of the level, you have a shield that protects you for 3 seconds every time you press this button, and that you start the level with 50 energy to power the shield, so you can press the button 5 times. So you might want to say, okay, well, that's great for free, but you might want to, sorry, I'm just going to take a drink 1 second. You might want to say, well, you can buy an extra 50 energy for that, and you can keep buying energy till you get to 1,000 energy. Now, you're not going to want to have 50 buttons in your store for these energy shields. You're going to want one button where you press it and you say, now you have 100 energy at the start, and you buy it again and you have 150 energy at the start, and you buy it again, you have 200 energy at the start. Now you might be thinking, well, why not just make it a consumable purchase then? Then you can buy it as many times as you want. But if you spend $10 buying an energy shield, and then you delete the game and you restore your purchases, you want to get that energy shield back. Now, it is quite simple in the end to deal with that kind of situation. You just have to make sure that your button is changing the purchase ID every time you buy it. So if the first time you buy it, the purchase ID will be item 1. The second time you buy it, the purchase ID will be item 2. The third time, item 3, and so on. You always know how much of a shield the player has because it will be the highest item item number that has been recorded. So if you purchased item 5, you purchased 5 extra shields, you've got 300 energy at the start of the level, you'll have recorded that in a game attribute or a table, and you know that the next time they press that button, it's got to be item 6 that's purchased. So it needn't be a complicated situation. It just takes a little bit of extra jiggling in your buy button. Now, the root of the suggestion that Colander made that I mentioned earlier regarding the restore button, why he was paying attention to it was a slightly different situation where he was thinking about, what about if I want to sell packs of different purchases? If I want to let a user purchase item A, B, C, D, or E, or a pack of item A, B, and C, or perhaps a pack of item C, D, and E, what happens if they've already bought one individually and want to then attempt to buy the pack? And so he wanted to make sure that he could be, when they restore items, that he could be knowing, are they restoring item A or are they restoring a pack of item A, B, and C? And it's well worth taking a look at what he writes in that thread because he gives a good rundown of the problem and a good idea of how he solves it. And it was a very helpful thread to read. I meant to put the link to it in the PowerPoint, but I obviously forgot. So yeah, that's basically the new in-app purchase system. A lot of considerations. Boil it down, and it's reasonably easy.
Thank you. We only had a few remaining questions that came in. I think you addressed this one. Will the demo file be available for download? I believe you mentioned that it's available for free on the thread. Is it in the thread?
Well, I'll pop it in the thread. It's been available for a while now. It's had quite a few downloads. So some of you watching, if you've downloaded it already and read through it, I'll have repeated an awful lot of the same stuff. But I'll put the link in the thread. Any posts on the forums that I make, there's a link in my signature to it as well. And I've resisted putting my website on anything here, but I'll make sure that the link is posted in the meetup thread.
Oh, actually, just as a courtesy, if you are presenting, you're allowed to advertise yourself a little, so feel free to put your website in there if you want.
I'll consider it for next time, but I made this template not as a thing to sell or a thing to advertise myself, but as something because once I spent all the time working out how to do it all, it seemed ridiculous not to save everyone else that time and to help them learn from the lessons I learned.
Sure, everyone thanks you. So now Dale had a question from earlier in it, so I'm just gonna, Dale, I'm gonna unmute you so you can ask it because I'm not sure when the context was because I wasn't looking when you asked it about.
I'm just going to stop sharing my screen as well because there's not going to be anything more for people to see now.
Okay.
I'll reshare it if a question prompts the need to.
All right, Dale, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask. It's something about can I load from tables, load it from tables. I wasn't sure when you were asking that.
Oh yeah, okay, thank you. Thanks for making the template. I had a question about, I guess where it says where you load the save attribute. I've been playing around with the template and I've tried to save using a table. I mean, is that something we could do? Like I would, could I just load from the table instead of using the save attribute? Because I know in the template you mentioned that there was, it's best to save as an attribute versus a table. Save into a table.
No, there's two things. I think it's two slightly different things going on there. It's only best to use an attribute if you've only got one or two of them. If you've got a few, then you might as well be using a table. But if you, like in this case, you've literally got one thing you're giving the user the opportunity to buy, a table is unnecessary extra overhead, and an attribute is better. You could replace it with a table, absolutely no problem. Just bear in mind you don't need to load the table like you do an attribute, but you do need to save the table like you would an attribute. When I mentioned not using a table, don't rely on the purchase table itself, was the point I was wanting to make there. You can't say, well, now that it's purchased, it says purchased in the purchase table, so why do I need to worry? Because when the user loads the game up next time, it won't necessarily have that information. You could save the purchase table every time, but that can be unreliable. So you're best off making your own table or your own attribute and saving using that.
Oh, okay.
All right. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm going to mute you again. If anyone has any other questions, just ask them directly in the question, or ask the question on the question section, and I'll unmute you so you can talk. While we're waiting, we'll set up a poll. Are there anyone else, if they have anything you want to talk about or randomly bring up, feel free. Or ask to unmute yourself if I want to.
Actually, I'll ask, going back to the restore button issue with not getting that information, because it doesn't change depending when you request to restore. Is that something that gamesalad would be able to force to happen, for there to be a change to that fifth column when a restore is requested so that we get the necessary feedback?
So what's the exact issue again on that, on the error?
When you request a restore, well, when you request a purchase, it will say pending.
Right.
And so you can then tell it based on if it changes to successful or unsuccessful, if it's been successful or unsuccessful. If the user hits cancel, it will swap to unsuccessful. When you request a restore, that doesn't happen.
So
you don't get that initial feedback.
So which bit of it isn't happening? Because I know when you hit restore and you purchase the item, it should definitely fill it in with purchased.
Well, it should fill it in with purchased.
There's no pending.
Once,
Oh, yeah.
once you've got the response, you know purchased or unpurchased.
Right.
But if you don't get a response, either because the user cancels or because there's no internet.
So you're saying that what you want it to happen is when you hit restore, you want the table to change to pending.
Yes, like with the buy, and then that would sidestep that whole issue.
Yeah, that's something we could do. Could you add a feature request or a report on that particular issue in the?
Actually, I'll just write down.
Yeah, if you enter that into bugs.gamesalad.com, I think we can probably get that into
that would be great. I think it's literally the only thing that
that
we could ask for now with the new in-app purchase stuff.
Cool. Yeah, just let us know so we can keep track of it, and because we got so many things that we'll, we just keep track of it here, we'll forget it by tomorrow morning. So yeah, just let us know in the bugs.gamesalad.com, and we can definitely do that.
So I'm going to unmute Scott Harrison just in case he has more comments, and I'm going to add. He's commenting that there are 18.2 million unique devices, iOS 6 devices that are jailbroken as of March of 2013, probably more now. So how secure is IAP?
It depends on who you're purchasing it from. If you're going from Apple, it's pretty darn secure. Everything's encrypted and gets decrypted using their API when it's being read back in. So it's basically as secure as it's going to get if you're doing it from Apple. If you're doing it from Amazon or Google, it is much less secure. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that. Their API simply is not a secure API.
And I think jailbreaking doesn't matter with the state of IAP security. It does mean, and I think there is a slight vulnerability in gamesalad in that you could, in theory, go in and then write enough changes to the well, now it's encrypted, so. Yeah, now it's encrypted, so it's actually secure from that attack too.
Yeah.
What I was going to mention was someone could change attributes in your game file, load up the game, and suddenly have everything unlocked to play with. But now that the game files are encrypted, if you've used one of the versions of gamesalad where the encryption's happening, it should be secure. Scott, if you have any more to say, let me know. If not, I'll mute.
Yeah. With Apple's latest system that they came out for iOS 7 and 8, that should be much harder to do now. Their earlier system was less secure, but with as long as the person's phone is using iOS 7 or iOS 8, that's going to be very difficult to do now.
And I hope. Oh, good. Oh, go ahead. So I think I know what the vulnerability is, and our current implementation doesn't help you with it. So what happens is the recommended system for in-app purchase, which we don't currently support, requires that you go through your own server, and what you do is you have what's called a receipt server. So the idea is you contact Apple, and then Apple sends a confirmation back to your server, and the rest of the communications related to the in-app purchase happen with your server. So you go to Apple, say, I'm going to make a purchase. Then you come back when Apple says they've made the purchase. You then go back and check your server, and if your server has the receipt that Apple sent directly to your server, the purchase is valid. So the problem is that requires you to set up a second server to do this stuff, and we have not built a system that allows that to work. I think you might be able to now kind of get away with it with the network behaviors.
Yeah,
sort of. It's kind of like overhead.
Actually, you couldn't do it with the network behaviors because you have to kind of set that up with Apple, saying where your server is and all that jazz.
But if you set up on their side, you can set up with your server and then on your app.
Right now, we have no way for you to tell Apple where your.
Oh, because you have to make it as part of that request. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, in that case, yeah, that would be the main security system around that particular bug that I think you're talking about. And so I guess we would need to add that as a feature in the future.
Yeah, that would be something we'd have to like sell as a bonus.
Yeah.
An extra feature you could buy. More IAP security. And actually, for even that, I know I'm not sure exactly what the vulnerability is that it's exploiting, but I know with iOS 8, with the common receipt, it should be much harder to hack unless they're doing like something like if they're somehow hacking it once the receipt has been decoded. But that would be it'd be possible, I guess, but tricky. However, with Amazon and with Google, you pretty much have to have your own receipt server to make sure that the IF is secure, which, again, unfortunately, we're not supplying at the moment. We could, but it would be costly.
Right. All right. Okay. If anyone else wants to join a conversation, I'm just trying to avoid unmuting everyone and getting all kinds of noise. Just raise your hand, and then I'll try to, if I can catch it, I'll unmute you.
Yes. 64, 32-bit.
Yeah, so that's the next one. Lovejoy, I'm going to unmute you in case you want to comment after we answer. The question is, when publishing through the gamesalad publishing portal, does it create a binary with both 32 and 64-bit support?
The answer is yes, currently, I believe. Is the current release candidate?
I don't know. I know we have 64-bit support. I don't know if we did both.
Yeah, well, yes. If it's 64, it's a combination of 32 and 64.
Oh, great. All right, so yes.
Yeah. I think it's only on the release candidate and the nightly build. I can't remember if we pushed it up nightly or not. I don't think so. So I believe it's only the current release candidate supports that at the moment. We haven't made a final build yet.
Yeah, we're in the process of doing an update to the release candidate, but
I know there was a hotfix that got put in yesterday.
But that's it. I don't think we've done anything new.
Yeah, so I think it's just in the current release candidate. The next time we get a nightly out, that will also be in the nightly. That code's been ported over, but we just haven't pushed out a nightly recently, and it is not in the current stable build.
All right, thank you.
And it seems that most of you use stable, but a few of you actually use nightly for your main development, which is brave of you.
Yeah. Is it just 64-bit for iOS, or is Android supported? We do not support 64-bit for Android at the moment. We probably will in the future, but currently Google hasn't mandated it, and we've been dealing with Apple's mandate first because they mandated it. So
I think Francis had a comment, or he raised his hand, so I unmuted you. So let me know. You can talk now.
We released a stable build with the iOS changes. Okay, so stable does have 64-bit support, evidently.
Oh, Monday. No,
we pushed one out on Monday.
Oh, that was on Monday. Okay.
Cool.
Yay. All right. Let's see here. I guess I'll start coming up with more polls until you And so if someone has more questions.
Yeah. I should mention one thing about the in-app purchase stuff. First of all, there's a couple of things that a couple of clarifications I'd like to make. One is that the time to purchase can be even greater than the purchase time that Emmeline gave, because if they have an iOS 8 device, because an iOS 8 device has a new system. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's basically a parent-child relationship where the parent can approve or disapprove a child's purchases. So you have your kid playing a game and he wants to make a purchase. The parent can basically set it up so that when he makes the purchase, it goes to the parent's device, and the parent approves or disapproves the purchase before that actually can get made. And that can take up to 24 hours. So it can be much longer than 30 seconds between when a purchase is made and when it's finally approved or denied. So you definitely need to keep that in mind when designing your UI for a purchase. Another thing I want to mention is that the description of the restore item says it restores non-consumable items. It will also restore this. It should, at least last I checked, it should restore this pending state of consumable items or purchase state of consumable items that haven't been consumed. So if I purchase a consumable item, but you don't call the consume behavior for that item, and then I shut the game down and restart it and hit restore, that consumable item will be flagged as purchased still until you call that consumable item behavior. So that's something to keep in mind for that.
All right, next question. Scott is asking whether Plays Together is, you can sign in yet. We should be able to sign in to Plays Together. If you signed up for it, we haven't gotten to the point where we can send you the confirmation email yet. So if you signed up and never got your confirmation email, we're still working on that problem. But if you already had an account, you should be able to sign in again. No, so what happens is we fixed the emails going forward, but we haven't found out how to send all the emails.
Oh, so if you had an account, you might want to create a new one then?
Yeah, if you had an account, you're fine. If you tried to create an account while the email is down and never got your confirmation email, you either want to create a new account or wait, and hopefully next week we'll have it set up so you just reset your password, and that kind of acts as your confirmation. Because we assume you reset your password, you have to get the right password reset email, which means you kind of confirmed your email address.
Right.
So we're going to be working on that, and I'm hoping it's going to be out sometime next week, the password fix for everyone. But for now, yeah, if you have an account and you've been able to use it before, you should be able to sign in again. If you didn't have an account, or if you signed up and never got your email, you're still a little bit stuck until we get this next fixed out. And then Dan Kilgore is asking, I want to create a separate display prompt versus display purchase states and buttons. Could I use global Boolean attributes to change images on the display prompt?
Probably.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I'll unmute Dan just in case he has more to elaborate on there.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was just wondering. I was doing a test, but I could use like the global Boolean attributes in the buy button, and then based on those, the state of that, like true or false, then I guess in the display prompt I could have like the image, a change attribute for the image that would display like the status of the purchase.
Yeah, I think that should work. So you do a check on the attribute, and then you just do a change image attribute, or change image attribute based on that status. I think that works.
Okay.
Well, I think the only thing is, as a Boolean, you don't have as many states expressed. because you can only do off or on. Like for instance, in a lot of these examples, there was the intermediate state. So you wouldn't be able to express that easily. So it might be better to do a number. I'd use it. Yeah, use an integer might be better.
Use it. Okay, I'll do that. Hey, thank you.
All right, I'm going to close the day job poll, and let's find out.
Quite a number full time. That's good.
Yeah. So the next question is, let's see here. Do I have that one in here?
Do you have any questions? Or?
No. Okay. I'll talk offline.
Okay. All right. I don't see any more questions, so we may be able to wrap up early unless anyone else has anything to ask, or I can do let's see what happens if I unmute everyone and, oh wait, we have a question, Scott. In Plays Together in gamesalad, why does it keep making different accounts when I use the same email and password when I put it in the server? That's something I don't know about happening. I'm unmuting you, Scott, just in case you want to elaborate, but I'll get someone to look at that, but I did not know that was a problem. Oh, so when in game?
Yeah, in game.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a new one. I haven't heard about that. There is a known bug where the current player's state can get overwritten by the server, so it'll effectively reset to its original state. That may be what's happening. But if you could write up a bug for that on bugs.gamesalad.com and attach your project, we could take a look at it.
Yeah, and if it takes a while to upload, you can also attach the publishing. If you've published the project, attach the publishing link for the project, and we can download it from there.
Yeah, because they shouldn't be doing that. If you use the same email and password, you should get the data that you previously had.
So do you know what causes the account reset on the?
Yeah, basically what's happening is that it's treating the current player as just any other player. So it's because for everybody except the current player, it's supposed to be constantly looking at the server and seeing if there's new data to get down. Well, it's doing that for the current player too. So it overwrites the data because it doesn't realize it's the current player. I just need to have a check for that.
Okay.
At that time.
So that might be what's going on with them. Is it?
Yeah, it might be just simply overwriting your data, but it kind of depends on how your game's set up.
So yeah.
So it definitely shouldn't be doing that, that's for sure.
So yeah, set up the project. So if it's set up, then you can look at it and see if we can just tweak the project, and if it's not, then we go to the project. All right. I'm thinking we might call it a day early because it seems even poll responses are slowing down some. That or people just really don't want to talk about how much they make from their games.
Yeah, not enough. Actually, it'd be interesting to see what would it be. How much would a game license be where it would cover it? If we lowered the price of Pro to
yeah, I should.
What would cover it? You know, what would cover your how much money you're bringing in?
All right. So I'm going to start unmuting people. Hopefully, you're not doing anything embarrassing right now, and just give everyone a chance to talk if you have anything you want to bring up. So I think you can't. That's by design, and it's while we could try to do it. So what we're doing is it's called Bugzilla, or if you notice references to Bugzilla in it, because we're basing it off the code base for Mozilla's bug tracking system called Bugzilla. And I think they did on purpose remove the ability for you to edit comments so that you couldn't change history on people. And so the only thing you can do is add a new comment on top of that and amend what you said, but you can't really change what you've said in the past. Yeah, so you should be able to do the main bug report, a change to the main bug report though, but yeah, comments I think are kind of permanent by design.
Okay.
And let's see here. All right, so poll results. Let's see here. A lot of you are doing an app purchase, which is good that we had this talk. Some of you are doing ads, which was not an option on here before because I kept forgetting to put ads as an option under default. And interestingly, some of you are being paid to make games, which is nice. So I guess that's going to be more or less it for the month. If anyone, so I'm not sure if we have anything planned for next month now because Alan's not here and I haven't been keeping track as much. Yeah. But if anyone has anything they want to talk about, then please contact Alan or leave a message in the meetup group, and we'll work with you to try to work with you to make you a presenter as well. Also, think of it as free advertising. So if you're selling templates or you're selling games and you want to get a chance to advertise your game and you have something interesting to teach us.
Yeah. And really thanks to Emmeline for doing this, having to be up at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, yeah. That's rough. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
No, you're quite welcome. I mean, now it's at night out anyway, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, thanks for sharing the template as well. I really appreciate it.
All right. So someone answered, I could do better. So please volunteer. We want you to do better.
Can you give us an idea when Graphing Beta is coming out? No, we can't. Sorry.
Stated all the graphene questions up to now.
Yeah, there were a lot last time, so I think everybody's kind of got the idea of what's going on.
And Armeline, in the question section, you're getting a lot of thanks. So
yes.
Okay, thank you. I can't see that, but thank you to those that and you're welcome to those that are saying thank you.
So I can honestly say I don't know because I'm not working. I do know we will have a physics engine built in. I'm not sure if it's Box2D because I remember there are discussions about other ones.
Yeah, there are actually better engines than Box2D out, but I don't remember if they're actually using it or not. And so yeah, I mean, it's going to be the idea is that it will be feature compatible with gamesalad. So if gamesalad has physics and graphing will have it, et cetera, and so on. Yeah. As far as specifics go, none of the graphing developers are here to talk about that. So unfortunately, unfortunately, we can't really get into details. But it should be feature compatible with what GameSalad currently has.
Yeah, I think the only technical things I know are I'm pretty sure they were looking at another physics engine, and I know the new graphics pipeline that's coming out for the next version of GameSalad, and it's currently in Windows Nightly.
It's in the Windows Nightly.
I think that's going to be used in graphene as well, and that one features things like automatically spreading or automatically dividing your what would you call it? It's automatically tiling your art and putting it into a database and loading from there.
Yeah, we went. There was Brian actually did a talk of that many months ago.
Yeah.
But,
so that should be in graphene, I think, because it was kind of being developed for both. But those are the only two technical details I know that I know. So even if I could, I can't hide anything because that's all I know right now. And here, closing the next poll. We've got
how to sell my games better. How to make games faster better. For people that want to sell their games better, go on YouTube and look up Extra Credits. That's a video series done by some game designers, and they've been doing a month-long series about how to create your first game, including how to sell it. I would highly suggest to watch that. So just look for Extra Credits on YouTube, and there's some useful information on that.
And if you're slightly on the evil side of the how to make more money from your games, you should watch the episode of South Park on on premium games, because despite being South Park, it was actually
very accurate.
Yeah, very accurate.
Yeah. Oh, Alan wants to be unmuted. Alan, you have something to say about graphene?
Or anything?
Oh, I was just going to field questions. I was just going to field questions if there's questions on graphene that you guys couldn't answer. That's all.
Can we start doing meetups on Friday? I know I can't. I've got things to do on Friday. I don't know about the rest of the team.
Yeah, I can do Friday meetups. I haven't in the past because I didn't know if other people would show up or not. But yeah, if everybody collectively wants to do Friday meetups, I don't have a problem moving it to Friday.
I have a standing thing on Friday, so I will not be joining for Friday meetups.
Yes. I have standing things now.
Yeah, I think the general idea is that Fridays tend to be
free weekend
activities. So.
Yeah. Also, one of the reasons why I haven't done it on Saturday or Sunday as well.
So you are welcome to host your own meetup on Friday, because we don't seem to have a lot of success getting physical meetups, but the virtual ones seem to work out well. So we can either we can figure out we can find a system where you can do a virtual meetup similar to GoToMeeting. Unfortunately, GoToMeeting is rather expensive. Or we can come up with something else. But yeah, if anyone's interested in hosting meetups, like aside from ours, go for it. And also, if you in your city, if you want to there are a lot of GameSalad users in your city, and you want to them to join you, then please do.
Yeah.
Actually, that might be an interesting one, because there are so many people and from different places. If anyone wants to, please chime in with a roll call on where you're from. Or you can, Oklahoma, okay.
Ohio.
One from Australia.
All right. It's now coming up on 8:30. I'm going to see if...
wait, we have one more question. Let's see. Can you visual edit and code in graphene? Yes. You can visual edit. You do not need to write code in graphene. You can use graphene the same way GameSalad is used, just dragging and dropping. The coding option is exactly that. It's an option. Yes. Yes.
That's the goal.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the big points about it is to let you do that.
There's
That I don't know.
So, yeah.
I can answer that.
Okay.
I can answer that. So yes, the idea would be that if you started doing visual coding or physical coding, you could hop back and forth between it. But also the idea is that the file is not in a weird format. You could just go look at the file and see what it wrote, and hand edit the file if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think one of the goals for Graphene was to make the file friendly for source control systems. So it's going to be very much traditional. It's like, even though it's Lua, it's probably going to be abstracted a bit from low level like engine manipulation Lua, but it should be very code. It'll look like code, and so it should be able to easy to diff, edit, easy to look at.
Forum spam.
Oh, forum spam. There was a question about that. Yes. So we've been. I haven't tracked to see if there's any new ones today. We tried to implement a few things around that. Apparently, there is either a botnet or a guy with a lot of servers in Korea, and they've been creating literally going through the whole account creation process, creating accounts on our system, and then getting onto the forums and spamming. So the whole email verification thing hasn't stopped them. What we've done recently to help slow them down a lot is we've made it so that you have to use, we've added Google's reCAPTCHA system. So if any of you ever wanted to sign up for a second gamesalad account, you would actually have to answer a checkbox that tells us you're human. Google kind of tries to figure out whether or not you're human from that answer. It doesn't always work, and occasionally it'll let people through easily the first few times before it starts catching on that you're a bot. So team members were able to make it on that way, and then on top of that, we found some signatures on how they sign up for accounts that we've been able to match, and so I think that's responsible for a lot less spam the last day or so, because we've been kind of preventing them from that angle. Though as soon as they figure that out, the spam might start up again. The only other option we have to keep this from happening is kind of banning all of South Korea outright, which I'm not quite ready to do yet. I'm assuming that's what you meant by form spam.
SQL support in Graphene. I don't think that's something we can talk about right now. Although I guess Alan can. If Alan wants to pipe in on that.
I can pipe in. I don't think there's any plans of now, but things are still changing, so
I mean,
undetermined.
In a way of thinking about it, it's a game engine, so I don't think we're building a whole database into the game engine in that way. But I mean, if you mean SQL support as an access to some kind of store of data, we already have that kind of now in gamesalad with the the network behaviors. You can go to a website that does the SQL stuff and sends things back in the table. And I'm going to guess that Graphene will have something similar. There'll be some network functionality that'll let you do that kind of stuff with the network. But
yeah, no idea.
Yeah, I have no idea otherwise.
You could also always write a. Yeah, you could always.
I'm sure there.
You can always write a plugin as well if you really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there are games that will need database, like internal databases at some point like that, but I don't think it's going to be like that at launch. It may be, and they may be doing it, and I have no idea, but I'm guessing they won't.
Yeah, they've got a lot of other stuff to do before they get around to that kind of level of thing.
And with half of us responding, which actually kind of tells you something about the group, I think we are done for the evening.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to Ameline again.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ameline. And yeah, if anyone wants to, if anyone has any more ideas, either for what they want to talk about or what they want to hear about, please let us know on the, I guess respond to the current thread, and then we'll roll that into, Alan can roll that into another thread later. But yeah, thank you very much for attending, and
good night.
Good night.
Or good morning, as the case may be.
Good luck building games. All right. Let me see. How do I end this?